الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا اللهم بما علمتنا وزدنا اللهم علما وعملا إنك ولي ذلك والقادر عليه. أما بعد، فهذا درسنا في بلوغ المرام الحافظ ابن حجر رحمه الله وغفر الله لنا وله ولسائر المسلمين. وكنا وقفنا في باب التيمم، وبقي بضع أحاديث في هذا الباب حتى ننتهي منه إن شاء الله. So we left off in the chapter of Tayammum. And before we start and take the rest of this chapter, we'll finish today inshallah with a few hadith left. Want to revise what we took before regarding this matter, Tayammum. So first, who can remind us when are we allowed to do Tayammum? متى يشرع ويباح التيمم؟ ما شرط مشروعية التيمم؟ تفضل. When there's no water available, or the other case when there is water, but like if a person,
it's you might be needing that water for the uses.
Yes, that's true. That's a good one. You might need the water for drinking. There's not enough water to do both, and drinking takes priority over wudu, because we have a substitute for wudu with the dirt, with the ground. We have no substitute for drinking though, so that we take priority. And the other one, if there is water and it's enough to drink and make wudu, but there's another problem. When يقال عند تعذر استعمال الماء, when a person cannot use the water for something specific to him, like sickness, if he has a sickness or a wound, for example, and if he gets water on that wound, it's going to make it worse. Or the water is very cold, and if he takes a bath in cold water, very cold water, he may get sick, and he doesn't have anything to warm up the water with, can't heat it up. So in this case, he's allowed to make tayammum. يعني يخاف من الضرر باستعمال الماء ولا يقدر على تسخينه. And he's this we mentioned last time the proof for this hadith of Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anhu, that he was anyway, we'll come to the proofs inshallah for this matter. Sorry, one second. So that's when we can do tayammum. That's the why we can do it, and how we do it. Who can remind us the steps we took to do it?
Place your palms on the ground. Strike once or twice.
Once.
And then wipe over the palm, and then same thing, and then the face, and then you've completed.
That's right, yeah. So first, of course, we make niyyah, like intention, that this is a worship in your heart, that you're trying to do tayammum. and then you say Bismillah on the beginning, just like with wudu, and then you strike the ground one time with the palms, and then if there's a lot of dirt, you blow it off. Because, like we said, the point is not to make ourselves dirty. This is a worship. The act itself is a worship. It's not the point. The point is not the dirt. So blow off the extra dirt, and then take the left hand, wipe it over the back of the right hand one time. Take the right hand, wipe it back over the left hand one time over the back, and then the face, the whole face, as we said, all of it in length and width. So that's it. One time hitting and one time wiping. And as we said, we can use anything. كل ما يصعد على وجه الأرض. إن الله نص قال في التيمم صعيد طيبا والصعيد وكل ما يصعد ويعلو على وجه الأرض. So what is we said anything that's on the surface of the earth. Safer to use something that's natural earth, be it rocks or gravel or dirt. Of course, dirt is obvious. But if there's nothing like, some scholars say even you can use, or even pavement. Pavement is dirt, is like the ground extension, or the walls. There's a hadith from Rasulullah wiped and did tayammum from the wall. Some scholars say it should be a wall that has not painted. Other scholars say even if it's painted, even if like this wall that we have in the masjid, if you don't have water and forever you can't use water, you can wipe over the wall even. Or a person is bedridden, you can't move to other places. So that's even a lot of the point is it's rukhsa. Rukhsa تشرع للتيسير و يعني كل ما يعني يطلق عليه كلمة جدار يدخل في الحكم. So anything that is called a wall, then we say it's allowed to use, because the purpose of this is to make it easy for us. Likewise, we talked about the sock. Anything that you call a sock. Some scholars say no, it has to be this thickness or so on, or it has to be this material, but all of that, it makes it complicated and takes away from the original message and the purpose of the wiping over the sock is ease. So any sock a person has, even if it's just wrappings on his foot, or if it has holes in it, but you still look at it and it looks like a sock, it's a sock, and you can wipe on it. So similarly here, and so that's what we took last time. Now we have the matter of, and we mentioned also the hadith that a person can continue to make salah with the one tayammum as long as he doesn't find water. He can continue on that first tayammum until he, of course, breaks his wudu. Then he has to make another tayammum. But he can continue making tayammum for as long as he wants, as long as he doesn't have water. Okay? But once he finds water, okay, then the following prayers, okay, he has to make with the wudu, with washing. But that prayer which he already prayed, he doesn't have to repeat, right? Which that last time, because that prayer which he did it soundly upon a taharat صعيد تيمم. هذا لا يعني يشرع تكرر عبادة ما. إذا أدي على وجه صحيح فليس هناك في الإسلام يعني إيجاب عمل ما مرتين إذا أمل مرة واحدة. هذا في الصلاة التي أداها. So when a person does the prayer on a tayammum, and then in the same prayer time he finds water. We said, what is that? We took that hadith that you might remember. The prayer time is dhuhr. He prayed dhuhr after tayammum. And then he finds water before asr time. Okay, for sure asr he's going to have to make, with the wudu, for sure, because he has water for asr time. But it's still dhuhr time. Does he have to repeat that dhuhr prayer? with the wudu, or can he suffice with the prayer he did with the tayammum? Who remembers? tayammum. يعني هذا قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم هو أصاب السنة والذي أعاد الصلاة فله الأجر مرتين. We took that hadith that the one who does suffices with the first prayer, then that's okay for him. He doesn't have to repeat it. There's no repeating of prayers. Generally, that's the general principle, that a person who does a worship, he's not asked to do the same worship again. You can take that as a general rule. Okay? Similarly, like they say in the chapter of Siyam, in fasting, that a person is not asked to do the same, fast twice. Like there was an example for that. Yeah, for example, this is the reason why some scholars say a person who was traveling and then he's allowed to break his fast. So he broke his fast in the journey. But in the same day before Maghrib, he comes back home. He comes back home at Asr time, okay, or even Dhuhr time. Okay, say Asr time, okay. He was fasting half the day. Now he's home. Does he have to, once he reaches his home, stop eating and drinking because he's in his homeland? Does he have to stop eating and drinking, because he reached home? He's allowed to break his fast, right? He was on a journey. But it so happened that he reached home before Maghrib. So the scholars who say he has to stop eating and drinking for the rest of the day because he reached his hometown, they say he has to repeat that fast, make it up after Ramadan. It was a Ramadan fast. Why? Because he didn't fast the whole day. He only fasted half a day. But the response to that is, first of all, it's obligating him to do the worship twice. Fasting that day, which he's not going to get any benefit from, okay, because he has to repeat it again. Fasting even half the day. And that goes into having a certain person do a worship twice. There's no benefit. So rather, the correct opinion, as Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen and other scholars say, is that he can go ahead and eat and drink, but not publicly, in his home, because it's Ramadan. Doesn't want to eat publicly, because he was allowed to break his fast for the first half of the day as a traveler. فمن أبيح له الفطر في أول النهار فأبيح له في آخر النهار. Because the one who is allowed to eat in the first of the day, he's allowed to eat in the end of the day, because he was the hukum of musafir. So what does he do though? He makes up his fast after Ramadan because he was a traveler. فعدة من أيام أخر ومن كان منكم مريضا أو على سفر فعدة من أيام أخر. As Allah said, whoever of you is traveling or sick, then make up the day later. But there's no benefit to fast half a day, So that's another, example of that. There's a difference of opinion on that issue, but that's one of the proofs on that matter. Okay, so next we took we stopped at this hadith. هو حديث ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما في قوله عز وجل، وهذا حديث 128 128 في قوله تعالى: وإن كنتم مرضى أو على سفر قال: إن كانت بالرجل الجراحة في سبيل الله والكروه فيجنب فيخاف أن يموت إن اغتسل فتيمم. وهذا الحديث ضعفه الشيخ الألباني رحمه الله في في ضعيف الجامع لكن معناه صحيح، فنأخذ بمعنى الحديث، وهو أثر موقوفا عن ابن عباس في تفسير الآية. So this next hadith is a tafsir of the ayah, which is reported from Ibn Abbas. Although the narration to Ibn Abbas is weak, according to Sheikh Al-Albani, other scholars, as well as other scholars, but the meaning of his interpret of the wording is good meaning, because it's supported by other evidences. Basically, the meaning, we won't spend too much time on it because it's a weak hadith, but the meaning is, if in the tafsir of the ayah where Allah said, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if you were sick or upon a journey, the ayah, وَإِن كُنتُم مَرْضَى أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ أَوْ جَاءَ أَحَدٌ مِّنكُم مِّنَ الْغَائِطِ أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً فَتَيَمَّمُوا الآية. If one of you is sick or upon a journey, and one of you then comes from the restroom, or he has relation with his wives, and he does not find water, then let him make tayammum, and to the end of the ayah. So here, first of all, the meaning of the ayah, where Allah said in this ayah, if وَإِن كُنتُم مَرْضَى أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ أَوْ جَاءَ أَحَدٌ, هنا الواو أو هنا تأتي بمعنى الواو، وهذا وارد في اللغة أن كلمة أو تأتي بمعنى واو، وهذا هكذا يستقيم المعنى. أي إن كنتم مرضى أو على سفر، وجاء أو بمعنى وجاء أحد منكم من الغائط أو لامستم النساء فلم تجدوا ماء فتيمموا. أي إن كنتم على سفر أو كنتم مرضى ثم أصابكم الحدث الأصغر، وهو أن جاء أحد منكم من الغائط، هذا الحدث الأصغر، أو الحدث الأكبر، أو لامستم النساء، هذا واو لابد منه، إنه هذا لابد من جمع السفر مع الحدث، لا يكون إحداهما، لا، لابد من سفر مع الحدث. هنا يشرع ويبيح التيمم، أو السفر أو المرض مع الجنابة، لابد من واو أن يجمع بين الأمرين، وهناك يشرع التيمم. So here, first of all, when Allah said in the ayah, if you were sick or traveling, or literally means or, one of you comes from the restroom, or has relation with his wives, and he doesn't find water, then let him make tayammum. It can't be or. Or in the Arabic language sometimes comes with the meaning of and. The huruf, this is the depth of the Arabic language. Sometimes the harf can have more than one meaning, or the letter, the word can have, adat, or the kalima can have more than one meaning. Here, it has to be and, because only a person is allowed to make tayammum when he's not only is he traveling, but he has a reason to make tayammum, and either he breaks his wudu or he has a relation with his wife. So, and he breaks his wudu, goes to the restroom, or has a relation with his wife. Minor impurity or major impurity, one of them has to be there. That's why and. Or if he's sick, كنتم مرضى وجاء أحد منكم. You're sick and you go to the bathroom. Okay, that's one benefit the Sheikh mentioned. And when it says إذا كانت, Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما said إذا كانت بالرجل الجراحة. الجراحة يعني الجرح، أنه يعني أصيب بالجرح بجسمه في سبيل الله. هنا قال الشيخ هذا ليس بقيد، أي لا يراد بالتخصيص أن التيمم إنما شرع في سبيل الله، أو عندما أصيب المجاهد في سبيل الله بالجرح. هذا وارد، لكن قد يكون حصل له سقطة فجرح برأسه وهو في بيته، فهذا يراد به المثال والأغلب، أو المثال أنه، أو الأغلب أن الإنسان يجرح في سبيل الله في الجهاد، لكن قد يجرح في بيته، فهذا ليس قيد، ليس المراد به التخصيص، إنما للمثال أو الغالب. So here, when Ibn Abbas in this report, he said, if a man has a wound while he's fighting in the path of Allah, okay, when it says while he's fighting in the path of Allah, that's an example. Meaning when he said, when you have a wound fighting in the path of Allah and you don't have water, you can make tayammum. Does it mean that's the only kind of wound, that is allowed to make tayammum for? No. A person could be in his house, cuts himself with a knife, or falls down, and he has a wound, that cannot have the water touch it. Why? Because he's afraid. Sorry, he has water. He has water, but he's afraid that he'll get sick if that water comes into his wound, and he may die. Then he can make tayammum. So any kind of wound. The point is, when it's mentioned fi sabilillah, هذا للمثال or للأغلب. This is for the example. Also, when it says نعم أو القروح, then he said, or a ulcer. Person may have not a wound, but he may have a sore or a infection in his skin or something that he cannot put water on it because he's afraid that he may die or get sick. If he takes a bath on this occasion, meaning he has major impurity in this narration, or could be even minor impurity. A person has a wound in the place of the limb of wudu, in his arm, in his forearm, and he is afraid to wash it. He doesn't have janaba, he has wudu, he has to make wudu. Here he can make wudu and he can make tayammum for this limb. Okay, this will come. Why? Because of this meaning is correct. What the wording is, if you have a wound, and you have either major impurity, janaba, or hadithun asghar, or you have gone to the bathroom, urinated, for example, and you have to make tahara, you can make tayammum for that wound that you are afraid to wash, because you may get sick or you may die. Here the wording is فَيَخَافُ أَنْ يَمُوتَ إِنْ اغْتَسَلَ. He says, and he's afraid that he may die if he washes it. قوله هذا يخاف أن يموت هذا أيضا للمثال ولا يراد بالتخصيص، لأن الضرر حاصل من ما دون الموت. يعني عموما إذا خاف الإنسان أن يتضرر بالماء ولو بدون الموت، بأن يصيب بمرض أو أو ازدياد المرض أو تأخر برئه من المرض، فيشرع له التيمم. وأن يخاف الموت من باب أولى، لكن لو بدون الموت يشرع له التيمم. So when it says here also, and he fears that he may die if he takes a bath. In this case, he's on major impurity or minor impurity. He's afraid he may die. He can make tayammum. Is it only if he's afraid he may die? Is that the only harm that allows a person to, not make use the water? Only in that life and death situation? No, not only. That's for sure. But even less than that, if he is afraid to get sick, even sickness, or increase in his sickness that he already has, or that he may be delayed in his cure if he uses water on that wound or some sickness he has that he cannot use water on his body. The doctors indicate to him that the water is harmful to him to take a bath or to put it on that limb that is affected, then he's allowed to make tayammum. Okay, so it's general. وهذا قال الشيخ يستدل على هذا بحديث عمرو بن العاص، فإنه لما كان ليلة باردة تيمم خوفا من المرض. لم يخاف الموت لكن خاف من إصابة المرض فتيمم. And the proof is the author of the hadith of Amr ibn al-As that it was a very cold night, okay, and he didn't have anything to warm the water up with. He didn't have a heater, so and he had a wet dream. Now he has to take a bath with very, very cold water. He may not die in this situation, but he was afraid he would get sick. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ approved of his action in making tayammum on that occasion. So that's the proof. ونص الحديث عند أبي داود قال عمرو بن العاص احتلمت في ليلة باردة في غزوة ذات السلاسل فأشفقت أي خفت، يعني هنا قال فأشفقت إن اغتسلت أن أهلك، فبالعكس هنا نص الحديث أنه خاف من الموت. عفوا، نص هذه الرواية أنه خاف من الموت، يعني فاغتسلت يعني فأشفقت إن اغتسلت أن أهلك فتيممت ثم صليت بأصحابي الصبح فذكروا ذلك للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال يا أمر صليت بأصحابك وأنت جنوب، يعني يمزح به. فقال أخبرته بالذي منعني من الاغتسال فقلت إني سمعت الله يقول ولا تقتلوا أنفسكم إن الله كان بكم رحيما. فضحك النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ولم يقل شيئا، يعني إقرارا على فعله. So this is the narration on this chapter. The author didn't bring it on this in this book, but it's a famous narration that we should mention. It's in Abi Dawud, reported from Amr ibn al-As, Sahib al-Qissa, the one who the story is about. He said, I had a wet dream during a battle of that Salasa. And I was afraid that if I took a bath, I would be literally killed. I would die, okay? But it may mean less than that anyways. But anyways, it was cold water. He didn't have anything to warm the water up. فَتَيَمَّمْتُ. Then I made tayammum. And I prayed. I led my companions in prayer upon major impurity without making a bath. There was water, but it was very cold water. So when I came back to the Prophet ﷺ, my companions asked about what I did. They questioned, was this right or not? So they go back to, of course, when اختلفتم في شيء فردوه إلى الله والرسول, as Allah commanded the believers. And if you differ in anything, then take it back to Allah and His Messenger. So they took back to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, Ya Amr, O Amr, did you pray with your companions when you were junub, when you were in a major impurity? And he was joking with him, as we'll see. Amr said, I was afraid. He explained to him, because the water was very cold, I thought I was going to get hurt. And I remember the statement of Allah. This shows his understanding when Allah said, and do not kill yourselves. Indeed, Allah is merciful with you. So he understood that from that, this situation applies, that a person will harm himself severely or harm himself if he takes a bath with very cold water. And that's true. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ agreed with him. He laughed to his statement upon this occasion, agreeing with what he did. So this is that hadith, and so that's okay. So now it brings us to the next hadith. The next hadith is from Ali radiallahu anh. Ali hadith رقم 29 بعد المئة. قال انكسرت إحدى زندية فسألت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فأمرني أن أمسح على الجبابر. وقال ابن حجر رحمه الله رواه ابن ماجه بسند واهن جدا، ضعيف جدا هذا الحديث. ووافقه الشيخ الألباني رحمه الله في ضعيف ابن ماجه، ضعف الحديث، فهذا لا يثبت هذا عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So next hadith from Ali radiallahu anh, he said one of my forearms was broken, and this is a weak hadith according to many scholars like Ibn Hajar, the author of the book, and also Shaykh al-Albani rahmatullahi ala al-Jami'. He said I broke one of my forearms. So I asked the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I had it splinted, a splint with like sticks, not a cast. Nowadays they do casts, but they used to do a lot of times a splint more often, not with plastering, but it was sticks with cloths. Why? Because the bone has to be fixed and not be, so it can heal properly. Once it's aligned, then you put these sticks and so on, called jabira. It's called jabira, splint. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam ordered me to wipe on the splint when it comes to making tahara. Why? Because obviously you don't want to get it soaking wet. It's on his forearm. If you wash it 5 times a day, the splint will be ruined. Okay, or it could be that the water may harm his maybe he has a wound or something. You can't get it wet. But this more likely is because it's a splint that cannot be dampened with water. But so this is one of the hadith that some scholars base upon that the legislation of wiping over the cast, okay, or a splint or a bandage. But this hadith, as you said, is weak. Okay, this hadith is weak. So and it's very weak, not just weak, very weak. Sometimes the hadith is a little bit weak, but Ibn Hajar said wahin jidda, very weak hadith. Okay, so we cannot use that as a proof. So the next hadith will come to hadith 30 بعد المئة عن جابر رضي الله عنه في الرجل الذي شج فاغتسل فمات. في الرجل الذي شج فاغتسل فمات. قال إنما كان يكفيه أن يتيمم ويعصب على جرحه خرقة ثم يمسح عليها ويغسل سائر جسده. رواه أبو داود بسند فيه ضعف وفيه اختلاف على روايته. هذا الحديث أيضا ضعيف ضعفه الشيخ الألباني أيضا كما قال ابن حجر هنا فيه ضعف. فقال الشيخ الألباني هذا فيه نكارة أيضا. So this hadith, the next hadith also is weak. This is the more famous hadith, which is has many versions. Okay, this is the hadith of the one who was on a journey. Okay, one narration it says this is the hadith of Jabir that he said خرجنا في سفر فأصاب رجلا منا حجر فشجه في رأسه ثم احتلم. So we were on a journey. This is another version, and one of us had a wound. One of us got a wound in his head, okay, from a stone. A stone fell on his head, or he fell on the stone, and he had this wound, and then he had a wet dream, janab, okay. فسأل أصحابه, he asked his companions, فقال هل تجدون لي رخصة في التيمم? He said to his companions who were with him on the journey, do you find any excuse for me to do tayammum? Because this wound, if I get water on it, it's in my head, it may, go into my, go into my wound and cause a problem, or just getting wet in general, Anyway, he's afraid about getting water on his wound in his head. So he asked them, فقالوا ما نجد لك رخصة وأنت تقدر على الماء. They said, we do not find any excuse for you when the water is here. We have water and you're able to use it, so you have to take a bath. This was their fatwa. You have to take a bath. فاغتسل فمات. So he took a bath and he died. فلما قدمنا على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأخبر بذلك فقال قتلوه قاتلهم الله. ألا سألوا إذا لم يعلموا إنما شفاء العي السؤال أي الجهل. إنما شفاء العي أي الجهل السؤال. So when they came back and they informed the Prophet ﷺ what happened, he said they killed him. Why? Because they spoke without knowledge. So he made dua, that they he reprimanded them, and they said, why did they not ask when they didn't know? Because the cure for ignorance is asking. They could have asked someone. Meaning there was someone they could have asked, okay? But they went ahead and gave this fatwa on ignorance. And they ended up the man dying, so they're as if they killed him because they spoke without knowledge. So here, this is the story, okay? Here, this is authentic to this point. And there's one, also it says, so the point is they asked him, they asked the one who was sick with the wound in his head, he asked his companions, can I make tayammum? Okay? And they said no. In one narration, Shaykh al-Albani said this narration is good, sound. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لما رجعوا إليه إنما كان يكفيه أن يتيمم. This is the هنا الشاهد. That when they came back, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after he reprimanded those who made fatwa without knowledge, he said it was just enough for him to make tayammum. That's all he had to do, was to make tayammum. And this fits with what we've taken so far, that a person, like the hadith of Amr ibn al-As, that when he was afraid of getting sick, right? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, make tayammum. Okay, why? Because the water was too cold. Okay, so similarly, if a person has a wound in his head, it fits with the other hadith in the chapter that when a person is excused in the تعذر استعمال الماء شرع له التيمم. Okay, this is the proof for why a person can make tayammum, because he has a wound or the water is too cold. So this is what we mentioned. So these are the proofs for that. Now, we started talking about the cast, right? The splint. Now, here's the point. There is a wording in that hadith that says, and that's the one that Ibn Hajar brought as weak, that he said is weak, في رواية في زيادة أخرى فيها أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ويعصر أو يعصب على جرحه خرقة ثم يمسح عليها, that he should have, the wording says he should have just made tayammum and then wiped or compressed or bound a bandage upon his wound, okay, and then wiped upon that bandage, okay, and then washed the rest of his body, and then washed in a bath because he had janaba, the rest of his body, which was free of injury. Okay. قال الشيخ الألباني رحمه الله فهذه زيادة منكرة لتفرد الزبير ابن خربق بها وخريب بها, ولذلك ضعفه الإمام البيهقي وابن حجر والألباني وغيره. So here, this narration to this addition, many scholars, Imam al-Bayhaqi, Ibn Hajar, Shaykh al-Albani, they said it's weak. Okay, why? Because of a narrator in that, which is Zubayr. This narrator, he is a weak narrator, and he's mentioning different from more authentic narrators. This is what's called munkar. Hadith fi nakara, that this is a, this is a, when a weak narrator brings a wording which is in opposition to or differing from authentic and stronger narrators. So this is munkar hadith. So that's why he said it's weak. And also, when you think about it, why would he have to do all these things? When we know the ease of the religion and the legislation of tayammum when a person is sick, okay, as Allah said in the Quran, "When kuntum marda wa ala safarin أو جاء أحدكم من الغائط أو لامستم النساء فلم تجدوا ماء أو لم تقدر على استعمال الماء فتيمموا." Then make tayammum. But is nowhere mentioned in the Quran or an authentic hadith, okay, that a person should have to wipe over his bandage also. Because this narration, if it was authentic, which is not, but look at it, it says he has to make tayammum, he has to put a bandage on the wound, wipe over the wound, the bandage, and then wash the rest of his body. All three things يعني لا يعقل أن يكلف بكل هذا وهو معذور, when he is excused from using the water. So the authentic narration is that this person, he could have just made tayammum, okay, because he had a wound and he could not have water get in the wound, so he's excused to just use the dry ablution. But you'll find many scholars, majority you could say, would say that he has to wipe over the bandage or the cast. And that's one opinion, okay? But Shaykh al-Albani, أيضا شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية والإمام البيهقي والشوكاني كلهم ذهبوا إلى أنه لم يثبت المسح على الجبيرة. كلهم قالوا أنه لم يثبت المسح على الجبيرة. So all these scholars that I mentioned, they based upon their researching the hadith, they said there's no authentic hadith that indicates that we're allowed to wipe over a cast. Okay, so the cast is there, to protect the area. So what do? We should at least make tayammum. Okay, and some scholars say that a person should wash that which he can wash safely from his body parts. Okay, whether he has to make a bath or he has to take a wudu, and then make tayammum to cover that limb which he could not wash. Okay, so this we can say, why? What's the proof for that now? When we said tayammum is ease, there is a narration that indicates that. Okay, which is that narration we started with, Amr ibn al-As. That narration, in it, ثبت في رواية, remember the one when he has very cold water, and then he made tayammum and prayed in that condition, and the Prophet ﷺ laughed, approving of that. In one narration, جاء في الحديث عند الدارقطني والحاكم عن أبي قيس مولى عمرو بن العاص بزيادة صحيحة أنه غسل مغابنه وتوضأ وضوءه للصلاة. هذه الرواية صححه الشيخ الألباني وغيره. والمغابن جمع المغبن أي بواطن الفخذين والإبطين، والمقصود أنها الأماكن التي لا يصل إليها الماء إلا بمشقة فتجتمع فيها الأوساخ. So this there is a narration authenticated by Shaykh al-Albani and others about this occurrence, that Amr ibn al-As, not only he made tayammum, okay, but he had a wet dream, okay, and he was afraid to use the cold water. He also took that water and washed those parts of his body which he could safely wash. Okay, he didn't want to get his whole body wet with cold water, especially his head, But there was places where there's a lot of dirt accumulating, like between the thighs or under the armpits, very dirty places where dirt accumulates, and he went ahead and washed those places with the water. Although it's cold, but he could do that safely without feeling he's gonna get sick. So he combined between those two. كما قال الإمام البيهقي فعل ما في الروايتين جميعا فغسل ما أمكنه من جسده مع كون الماء باردا شديدا ونعم وتيمم للغسل. So he did both. So whatever he could wash safely, he washed. And for the rest that he was afraid for, he could not use water on, he made tayammum to cover it. So هنا الجمع وهذا من باب الاحتياط كما قال الشيخ الألباني ليس من باب الوجوب. الواجب عليه التيمم. Okay, so what is obligatory upon him is to do tayammum. Okay, but whatever he can wash safely, if he's sick, for example, then he should wash, or whatever we should say it's whatever he can wash, he must wash. Okay, that'd be safer. Whatever he can wash, he must wash. Okay, وهذا سواء في الحدث أو الطهارة الصغرى أو الكبرى أي الوضوء أو الغسل. فهنا يقال يعني حتى لو كان يعني إنسان مجروح فخشي على نفسه إن أصابه الماء أو عليه الجبيرة فلا يمكن أن يصيبه الماء فمثله هذا يغسل السليم من جسده ويتيمم لما لم يصبه الماء. So this is the same. The conclusion, if a person has a wound, okay, like the one who was hit in the head, or he has a cast or a bandage, and he's afraid that water touching either of these two will cause sickness, then he washes whatever of his body he can wash safely, and he makes tayammum for that area which he cannot touch the water. Okay, so that's this is what the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah, والشوكاني والألباني والإمام البيهقي. So this is the opinion of some scholars, and it goes back to the fact that they said there's no authentic wording about wiping over the cast. والأصل في العبادات التوقف. العبادات توقيفية. يعني لا يشرع لنا أن نجتهد في ما لم يرد فيه النص، بل نقف عند النص الصحيح ولن نتجاوزه. So this means the worships are توقيفية, meaning we have to stop from waqf. We have to stop wherever the text says. We have a hadith or ayah about washing, of course, Bulugh. We have a hadith, an ayah about tayammum over the face for the face and the hands in the case of sickness. Okay, in the case of sickness, we have hadith about masah al-khuffayn, wiping over the socks, and ayah in the Quran also. But do we have any hadith or ayah about wiping over the cast? Authentic? These scholars say no. Okay, so we naqif huna. We don't do that. Okay, wiping over the matters, because it's not been reported. Wiping even over the wound, or a cast. Basically, that's what the opinion is not to do that, because there's no authentic proof. Okay, so any questions? So what we took so far on today?
I might miss it. So there is no Sahih riwayah on that wiping over the cask.
Yeah, that's what he said. This is the opinion of some scholars. When it goes back to the narrations, So there's no authentic Shaykh al-Albani, and others say there's no authentic narration. That narration that is in the story about the one who cut his head or had a wound in his head, that narration only mentions tayammum. Yeah, it only mentions tayammum, the authentic one. There's a weak narration, but there's a narrator that is a weak narrator, and he opposes more authentic narrators. The authentic narrators, or the stronger narrators, did not mention the wiping over the cast or the bandage, or that there was a bandage. Only this one narrator mentioned it. Zubair, that was the narrator. So the point is that that's a type of weak hadith. So it would not be legislated. Now some scholars make yes, okay, when there's no, when there's no authentic hadith, like Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, he made qiyas, following other scholars before. It's like the wiping over the sock, you know, but it's not really, proper, because it's a different. There's a difference in the ruling, Wiping over the socks is established, of course, but in this case, we already have, tayammum, for this person who's wounded or a cast. We already have tayammum. Why should there be bring into it qiyas now? We already have a worship that we're already covered with. So that's one opinion. So that's the last. There's one more hadith, but it's weak. ضعيف جدا. The last hadith is ضعيف جدا, but the author just brought it as a collection. Sometimes the scholars, they mention hadith in their books that are weak because there may be other hadith that come along that he doesn't know, or other scholars collect that they combine with this hadith and come up with a conclusion that can be raised with other supporting evidences, or is to benefit us that this hadith is weak, that we should know. And this hadith, عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال من السنة ألا يصلي الرجل بالتيمم إلا صلاة واحدة ثم يتيمم للصلاة الأخرى. رواه الدارقطني بإسناد ضعيف جدا. So this hadith is very weak, that reported from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, that from the Sunnah, that he said is from the Sunnah that a man should pray only one prayer with the tayammum, and then he must refresh his tayammum when he still doesn't have water. And the next prayer comes, he should refresh his tayammum for the next prayer, and so on, refreshing the tayammum. But this hadith is weak. So the opposite is true then. That just like with wudu, with ma, we don't have to refresh as long as we didn't break it. We continue as many prayers as we can. Okay, same thing with the tayammum. We make tayammum one time, we can pray as many prayers until we have hadith, until we break our wudu, our tayammum, and so on. Okay, so then next chapter is al-hayd, the chapter of the menses. Inshallah, we'll pick up there في الدرس القادم. تفضل.
So for like the tayammum, what about the major impurity?
Same. Major impurity. The hadith that we took last time, Ammar ibn Yasir, that he was on a journey and he had the major impurity. And let's see, it was in the beginning of the chapter. Yeah, Ammar ibn Yasir قال بعثني النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم في حاجة. He was on some task. فأجنبت, so I had major impurity, probably wet dream. فلم أجد الماء, and I didn't find any water. This is the case of a person that has no water. فَتَمَرَّض, then he made ijtihad. He started to roll around in the dirt, thinking that he has to, like water, put it all over his body, the dirt, just like water. But when he told that he did that, the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا كَانَ يَكْفِيكَ أَن تَقُولَ بِيَدَيْكَ هَكَذا, that it was sufficient for you just to, and he demonstrated how to do it. So major impurity, and a person has no water, or it's only enough water to drink, or he's sick and he cannot use the water on that body or body part, then he makes tayammum.
So
Yeah.
he can only pray, but he could pray
Oh.
more than one salat.
Oh, yes. Yes. That's sorry. That's your question. Yeah, he can pray just like with the wudu. When we may have tayammum as a substitute for ghusl, bath, you can continue for as many prayers as long as you don't find water. Yeah. As soon as you find water, then the following prayers have to be with the bath. You cannot no longer continue using that tayammum. Yeah, for any future prayers. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good question. So any either major or minor impurity, the tayammum is sufficient for you until you find the water. We have about 10 more minutes. Any questions on this chapter at all?
For like two of the hadith, you said they were very weak, but then one you said was lahijid, and the other one you said is dayujid. Is there a difference between the two?
It's another term. It has a similar meaning. I don't know, there might be a little detail in the discrepancy, but as far as I know, it's the same conclusion, that it's very weak. It has in the meaning, as far as I know, it's the same meaning. Yeah, but either way, I cannot find any proof from it. Yeah. So, any other questions?
For the one who did Mas'ad al-Jabair, what can we do? His wudu is correct, or just
Oh,
tayammum and repeat his prayer?
I mean, because he followed, the opinion of some scholars, he didn't come with something on his own. He asked, Yeah, he asked the scholars, or what the fatwa of some scholars. So it's he does not have to repeat the prayer. Yeah, but if he was on opinion upon unlikely, but if he was upon this opinion, and but anyway, so probably not. But if he in the future, basically, if he is upon this opinion, okay, and this is the one that makes sense to him, and if he comes to know that the hadith is weak, then his prayer is false. Yeah, basically, because now it's upon knowledge. Yeah, he's doing it against, although he knows better. Similarly, like we said, the one who repeated the prayer, in that case it was clear he should not have. The one who did the prayer correctly on tayammum, then he found water, and then he repeated that prayer. And that he shouldn't have done that. But he didn't know better. He made ijtihad. So his prayer is fine. In fact, he's rewarded for his ijtihad. As in the hadith, he has two rewards. But the one who did not repeat, he's better, for sure. But now, since we know this ruling, we cannot say, we'll make ijtihad, because now we know the hadith. Yeah, we have to follow what the hadith tells us. Hadith says, you don't repeat your prayer. That's the sunnah. Okay? So, in this case, so why is it that ijtihad was forgiven by that sahabi? He repeated the prayer. But the ones who told the man who had the cut in his head, and he asked, can I make tayammum? And they said no,